Hey everyone, welcome to Plant Prescription, a podcast from Costa Farms where we come in and we try to help answer some of your common gardening questions. We're so excited that you're joining us. This is our first ever episode, so bear with us as we figure out what we're doing. I'm Justin, a horticulturist here at Costa Farms.
And I'm Michelle, an IPM manager at Costa Farms. Each episode, we're going to get together and give our take on common plant questions, from banishing bugs, my favorite. Bear with me, I may go on a little rant because I love my bugs. We also are going to talk about basic plant care, helpful plant information, and some behind the scenes tips. We'll cover topics that matter to you, and we hope that you have fun while we do it.
So what are we going to talk about today? So glad you asked. Today we're going to be talking about repotting new houseplants, Raven's Easy, and Fungus Gnats. But since this is all new, here's a little more about us. Michelle, since you're so fabulous, do you want to start off?
Why, thank you, Justin. So my name is Michelle. I am an IPM manager at Costa Farms. I manage our North Carolina facility.
Hey, Michelle, what does IPM manager mean?
I was just about to say that, Justin. IPM is short for Integrated Pest Management. Basically, what that means is I work with all of the bugs and pests and disease on the farm, and I combat them every day using more bugs, good fungus, and good bacteria. IPM, you'll use a lot of beneficials. You also use some chemical and physical control as well. It's integrated pest management. It's using all facets of how you can control bugs and disease. But my favorite part is using bios, beneficials, and good fungus, good bacteria. I love that stuff. So that's what I do. Before that, I worked at Costa for 7 years. I was in research and development, and then I spent some time in growing as well. But I have found my forever home with IPM, and I'm never going anywhere else because bugs are so much fun. I hope that you guys will see that. I hope I can hope I can show you that one day. So before Costa, I'm going the opposite way. So before Costa, I got my degree in biology and I concentrated in marine science of all things. And I spent some time on a boat in Alaska and Australia. But once I got off the boat, I realized that plants were really my calling. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll see I've got a couple of them behind me. It's kind of a no-brainer. I love plants. I have over 400 in my collection currently, and it just keeps growing. Ha, ha, ha. Anyway, that's a little bit about me. Justin, why don't you tell us about yourself?
So I first started at Costa in 2013. I have a background in plants and horticulture. I have a degree in horticultural science from the University of Wisconsin. I grew up in the Midwest, and unlike most kids, I knew from the beginning that plants were what I wanted to do. You know, in kindergarten, you had all those kids who wanted to be firemen and astronaut. I wanted to play with plants for the rest of my life. So went to school, got my horticulture degree, jumped into horticultural publishing, worked at Better Homes and Gardens as the garden editor for 10 years, and then came over to Costa, where I love interacting with people and helping answer questions. So this podcast is kind of perfect for me.
It really is.
All right, so let's jump into our questions. Common one we get a lot: when should I first repot my brand new houseplant?
You know, honestly, my gut on this one, which I know you're going to disagree with me on it, but my gut, because I'm just, you know, I just do what I want, says whatever you want. I've gotten some houseplants that I pot up right away because I have the perfect pot and I can't wait to pot them up. And then sometimes if it's more of a quote unquote delicate plant, like a couple of them behind me, I'll let them acclimate for about a week. But it takes everything in me sometimes to not pot it into my pretty pot. But that's just me. I'm the whenever you want kind of person. But what do you think, Justin?
Well, I think it depends on why you want to repot it. If you want to repot it just for the sake of repotting it, then don't. If you want to repot it because you want to put it in a more attractive container, then absolutely. If you feel like it needs to be repotted because you're afraid you need to change the soil out or afraid it might be root bound, you probably don't need to worry right away. My general rule of thumb is I like to wait, a week, 10 days after bringing a plant home before repotting it, because there's a change of environment and there's a little bit of stress going on. And I
Yep.
don't want to add to that stress by giving it transplant stress, basically.
Yep.
Um, if you're afraid it's really root bound, simplest thing to do is slip it out of its pot. If you see roots circling and circling and circling around the perimeter, yeah, then it's root bound, and it would probably benefit from being repotted after it's settled. But if you don't, then it's really up to you. And do you want to put it in a new pot or not?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like I said, about a week, but I sometimes just have pretty pots I want to put things in and I can't wait. So
And then when you repot, I always recommend loosening up the root ball. So you mix the two kinds of soil, the old and the new. That's really important because I have discovered from personal experience that the old root ball can hold moisture at a different rate than the new surrounding soil. And so when you stick your finger in, because that's the way that I gauge watering, it might feel dry, but the surrounding soil is plenty moist or vice versa. So you may not be watering your plant properly.
oh, that's very true. That's very, very true. Well, Justin, if you had a plant that like looked really big, right? And it looked like it was in a small pot, would you just by habit just take it out and check the roots on that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm, yeah. Well,
Um,
we were close. We almost agreed
yeah.
on that one.
A time that I might not check the root, the roots is if the plant seems like it's top heavy, and
Mm,
the pot is not supporting it well. Every once in a while, you see a plant like that where the canopy is just so big and it doesn't necessarily have as big of a root system.
yeah.
Some of the aeonium succulents, for example, can do that.
Yeah.
And then I would do a bigger pot just to make sure that it has stability.
Yeah, I've had a couple of plants that are like parasols or like parachutes, like palms and things like that, that just the wind catches them and they just fall right over. So, um, when I was repotting plants that were a little bit top heavy, I would always put rocks in the bottom of my pots just to make sure they didn't fall over more. Or you could just kind of bury the pot in the ground a little bit too. That's another trick to keep it from falling over. But that's a little bit harder. Rocks are easier.
They definitely are.
Yeah.
All right, second question. I have fungus gnats. What do I do?
Oh, good.
And Michelle, since you're in integrated pest management, why don't you take this one first?
All right. Well, you're gonna have to cut me off when I need to stop talking because I could talk about this for a very long time. So you've heard the phrase, there's a thousand ways to skin a cat. There's a thousand ways to kill fungus gnats. It's actually like an easier, quote unquote, easier one to deal with. So fungus gnat adults are more of a nuisance than anything else. They're the adult flies that you see kind of getting in your face and your mouth and your eyes. They love to go for those moist areas.
A lot of
And
people will mistake them for fruit flies.
Oh yeah. Well, the easiest way to tell them apart is they're just larger. And fruit flies have kind of more of a torpedo body shape if you get to like look at a fungus gnat versus a fungus gnat kind of reminds me more of like a mosquito. And the adults tend to do this like twitchy thing when they're walking and you'll just kind of see them twitch. They're kind of funny like that. And fruit flies don't typically do that. But anyway, so the adults are more of kind of the nuisance. They're just annoying. They're everywhere and they get in your mouth and it's annoying. But the real problem that fungus gnats cause are the larvae of the fungus gnats. They look like little maggots. And they've got like this black head, big, beefy, maggoty body, and they're found in the soil where your plant, of your plant. So fungus gnats, for the most part, adults are kind of a nuisance, but if you see larvae, you really should try to kill them. Um,
So,
and there's
Michelle,
a
how do
lot
you
of
identify the
ways.
larva?
Um, so if you've seen fly maggots. They, I know, I would, like, oh, I really hope you don't describe this too much more, but they look like fly maggots. And they're very slow moving. They're kind of big, white, like squishy with a big black helmet head. They're not, they're about the size of like a grain of rice. So they're not giant, but they are like fat and squishy and white, and they've got black heads. They're very slow moving. They tend to hang out on the first inch of your soil. So you don't have to dig too far down to find them. If they're there, they'll be on the top level. So I hope I didn't gross you guys out too much. So that's fungus gnat larvae. There's a lot of ways to kill them. So there's a lot of ways to kill fungus gnats. You probably should go after adults and larvae at the same time, because if you only focus on larvae, the adults are going to keep laying eggs and you're going to keep having problems. So one easy way to kind of nuke fungus gnats is to change your environment. They really need moisture to grow, and moisture will also cause fungus, which will attract them. So just by simply cutting down on your water and trying to like cycle your plants, if they need to be wet, that's fine, but cycle them to dry and then wet again, dry again, so on and so forth. That hard cycling is difficult for them to survive. Yes, Justin.
Would you say that if you have fungus gnats in something like a pothos or a fiddle leaf fig, that you may be giving it a little more water than it needs anyway?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, fungus gnats are attracted to fungus, which not all fungus is bad, but typically speaking, if you're keeping your plants wet, you're going to attract fungus gnats. So by simply drying them down, or at least doing some hard cycling and letting them go dry and then watering them, or letting them get like, the light brown and you stick your finger in and it's barely damp. Letting them go that dry would help a lot. Another thing that I've seen people do in regards to changing their environment is to change your potting mix, to not have any organic substrate in your potting mix. There's a girl I follow on Instagram, and she was having horrific fungus gnat issues, and she changed to using all clay aggregate, leca. What I call it, I don't know. People call it leca. I call it leca. But the clay balls. So you could do that, because that would prevent larvae, because fungus gnat larvae need organic substrate to eat and to grow. And so if you really are just at your wit's end, you could convert your plants to growing semi-hydroponically with leca, or perlite, anything really that's not organic. That would also get rid of larvae because they can't survive. So those are two environmental things that you could do. You could also do physical things. The yellow sticky cards work really well to catch adults, but you want to make sure if you use the yellow sticky cards, you put them close to the plant, not far away. You put them like right at the soil surface area, because that's where the fungus gnat adults are going to hang out and lay their eggs. And you want to kind of trap them there. So don't put it too far away. Put it close to your plant as possible without getting it stuck on a leaf, because we've all been there and done that. That stinks
Or
too.
on ourselves?
Yeah. Oh God. It was horrible. I got a sticky card that was like full of stuff,
Oh,
stuck to my hair. And it was really nasty because it doesn't come out of your hair. You could get it out, but then you have like dead bugs and like glue. It is just, yeah. So watch out for your plants and yourself. Um, Another thing that you could do is you could, regarding to like physical extraction of fungus gnats, you could try to put a potato, like slice a piece of potato and put
what?
that,
I've never
yeah,
heard this one.
yeah. So this is fun. I've done it before and it kind of worked. It was kind of gross. So this is not for the weak stomachs. This is, you got to have a strong stomach for this one.
Well, you
But
have been
slice.
talking about maggots, so.
You see a lot of things, and yeah, you see a lot of weird things. Um, I almost went off a tangent. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to gross our listeners out too much. But so you take a slice of potato, and you stick it in your pot. And the smell and the scent of the potato is going to attract larvae. It'll also attract the adults, keep in mind. So it may be really kind of uh, like a three-pronged attack is to put a potato in your plant, put a sticky card on the soil surface, and then we'll go over a couple of things that you could drench. But basically, what you're going to do is all the larvae are going to come in, and the adults are going to come in because they like the smell of that rotting, decomposing potato, of course, fungus, and they're going to burrow into the potato. And then that's a really good way to tell if, number one, you have larvae in your plant. And then number two, it's simple to just remove the potato with the larva in it. And that way you're physically removing larva from your plant. Now, don't forget the potatoes in there, because you will grow a potato plant if you forget that's in there. So
Now,
potato, go ahead.
if you don't want to go a gross way, one of my go-to for fungus gnats elimination is putting like an inch or two of sand over the top of the potting mix. That creates a barrier because again, they don't have the organic matter, and sand dries out so fast
Mm.
because you have so much airspace in between the particles that they can't lay their eggs. And so after a few weeks, the population just dies out.
That's a good one. I've never heard that one before. That's really good. I've also
We
heard
need to
people
talk about
using
fungus gnats more.
I feel like I talk about it a lot. But um, another thing I've heard, speaking of going off the sand thing, is people use diatomaceous earth, which I'm kind of on the fence about because you really don't want to breathe that stuff in. It's basically like sharp little shards of substrate, and it will basically cut insects. But if you breathe that in, imagine what it's doing to your lungs. So a lot of people I see use diatomaceous earth, which is fine, but I always get nervous about that. But that would also work because it would just cut them to shreds, which is also gruesome. Okay. Another thing I've heard in the industry is people using bounce fabric sheets, like the fabric softener sheets. Um, I've heard some people try to use those and hang them around, and apparently the smell of it will deter fungus gnats. I have tried this, and although the room smells really good, I still have fungus gnats. So it's something worth trying. It wouldn't hurt, especially it would make every space smell really good and clean. But I'm on the fence if that one actually works or not, to be honest. So those are your physical ways, environmental ways. And now let's get into the really nerdy part, the biological ways of getting rid of them. So this is my jam. I love biological control, beneficials, things like that. And there's a lot of things on the market for fungus gnats. And one of the more common ones that is super easy for anyone to buy is the mosquito bits. Mosquito bits, they kill mosquito larvae, but fungus gnat larvae are so similar to mosquito larvae that it will also kill them as well. And these are just like little bits you can buy on Amazon. You can dissolve it in water, pour it into your plant. And basically, what you're putting in your plant is a bacteria, Bacillus thuringiensis. Oh, I'm horrible with Latin names. It's so bad. But you pour it in, and basically how this bacteria works is it'll kind of colonize the plant root, and it's harmless to plants. It's naturally found in the soil as is. But what happens when that fungus gnat larva eats it, it'll actually disrupt their intestines, and it'll kind of give them a horrible, horrible stomach ache and then kill them. So you could use mosquito bits and dissolve those and pour those in. There has been some issues with maybe resistance to this. So it may work, it may not work because your bugs may have developed a tolerance for it, so to say. So another option is nematodes is another thing that you could drench, which is super fun. These are basically microscopic little worms. And again, you mix it up with water and you drench it. Try to follow the label, but if you put more nematodes in than the label says, that's fine. It's not going to kill your plant. It's going to be okay. But pour them in there. And how they work is they actually will burrow into the fungus gnat larva, and then they will reproduce inside of this like maggot. And they reproduce to such an extent that they will explode out of said larva, which is, I feel like I feel like people are going to listen to this and be grossed out, but it's really cool because they work very well. There's a lot of strains in nematodes, so be careful. Make sure if you do go nematodes to select Steinernema feltii, which boom, nailed the scientific name or the Latin name on that one, Justin. But
Good
it
job.
was, thank you. I'm really bad at Latin names, but Cynornema feltii, that is the strain or the species that goes after fungus gnat larvae. You can buy them. I've seen them on Amazon. I've never bought them on Amazon, but Arbico Organics is another supplier that can send, smaller amounts of biologicals to your door. So Arbico
I
is
think
another.
this is a great topic for a future podcast, but just high level. How would you address the folks who like the idea of a natural control, but don't necessarily feel comfortable with the idea of bringing more bugs or worms into their collection?
That was going to be something I was going to say because I actually have two more bugs that I was going to recommend getting if you're okay with adding bugs. Honestly, I I would recommend. If you are on the fence about adding bugs, I just hope you understand that not all bugs are bad. But nematodes are the kind of quote unquote, they're not really a bug. They're a nematode. It's not like it's hard to kill them, but they're microscopic. So you can't even see them. They're not going to leave the soil mix. They're not going to get onto you. And I think nematodes would be a really good one for people who are afraid of adding more bugs because this is just basically, it looks like a cloudy water that you're putting on and you'll never see them. But if you do want to see them, I would recommend you do look at them because it's really fun to look at. You can, if you have really, really good eyes, you could actually see them. But otherwise, you're going to need like a little jeweler's lens. You could even try to zoom in on your phone and hold it against light. So that light's shining through the back of it. And you should see like little things squiggling in there, which I know isn't helping for people who don't want to add bugs. But it is kind of cool to know that the product that you're applying is alive. Very similar to the mosquito bits. It's a bacteria. It's I think it's difficult to kind of cross that bridge, but I think once you see the good bugs work and once they save you that time and that energy and that money and that heartache, I think you'll warm up to them, but you just have to see it first.
All right. And then you said you had two more recommendations for natural fungus gnat control.
We'll go through really quickly on those two. So the other one, because I know you're pushing me because I'm getting on a rant. So the two other ones are Atheta or Delosia. They changed the Latin names. I don't know why they do that, but Delosia, Atheta, you can also buy those from Arbico, or you could probably try to find them online. They're predatory rope beetles. They're super tiny. They're very cute. They wiggle their butts, and they fly. So the great thing about them is you can put them out in the general vicinity, but they'll go find where the problems are for you. It makes your life so much easier. And they're a generalist soil predator. They'll eat a lot of things in the soil. They love fungus gnat larvae. Another thing is flies, is hunter flies. And again, people see flies and they think, ew, housefly. I hate it. It's gross. Let me kill it. But there are these things called hunter flies. They're also called tiger flies. They look like little tiny house flies and they have stripes on their abdomen and they're really good control bugs because what they do is they'll kind of linger and stay out and hang out on a leaf and they'll kind of watch and anything including their brother that flies in front of them, they'll jump off the leaf, grab it, kill it, suck the guts out, and then they'll go back and sit on the leaf and wait for the next one. And it's a fly and a lot of people think flies are bad, but in regards to fungus gnat adults, they're really one of the big ones that'll kind of clean up your fungus gnat adults because they're like super slow and easy prey for them. So hunter flies, again, little tiny looking house flies, they're your friends, not your foes. And I'm gonna stop because I can tell we need to move on to the next topic. But Justin, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, actually, another insect related question that I'm sure some of our audience is wondering about. Are adult hunter flies going to be as annoying as fungus gnat adults flying around
No,
your house?
no, only because I would say not. I've had hunter flies and I like them just because I know what they are. But for the most part, like I said, hunter flies tend to stay still. They tend to hang out in one spot and bait. And then they'll kind of leap, grab it, and go back down. Versus fungus gnat adults are going to be kind of like flying around very slowly in your face. Hunter flies aren't going to go for your face. They tend to stay lower and they tend to stay still until something flies in front of them.
Excellent. Yeah, you might just have me sold on that one.
Well, you can't buy them, unfortunately, but they have been found pretty much across the entire US. They came in, they're one of the only good bugs that came in from another, they came in from Europe. I think it was in 1993. Please, nobody fact check me on this. I think it's about 1993 that they came in on a boat from Europe. And they've kind of just taken over. They're not taken over, but they've kind of made themselves at home here in the US. So they're not produced en masse, but you can pretty much find them everywhere now,
Great.
as long as you don't kill them, because they're not a housefly. Okay, anyway. So
Excellent.
what's
Thank
our
you,
next
Michelle.
question, Justin?
All right. We get
Please
a lot.
say it's not bugs. Okay.
We get a lot of questions about Raven ZZ plant. It's beautiful. It has that lustrous purple black foliage. And probably the most common question we get about it is, how do I make it grow faster? And so from my standpoint, there's a couple of facets of this. One, make sure it has lots of light, because light is the primary driver for everything. But then the other one is also make sure that your expectations are being set realistically. ZZ in general is a slow grower. And if you're thinking that your Raven should grow as fast as a pothos, then I'm afraid that it's just not going to do that for you.
No, I've had a Raven ZZ and it's grown, but I mean nothing like a philodendron. And so I have a question for you, Justin, regarding the Raven and just ZZs in general. I remember we were talking once, and I think you had said that they actually prefer tight spaces. Would that help them? Because I've potted a couple into larger pots and they do okay, but I did notice that the ones in the tighter pots seem to be throwing out a little bit more branching, at least. So would like up potting a Raven kind of set it back? First of all, the up potting stress and all that jazz, or would that matter at all?
I think up potting will slow it in the short term because
Mhm.
it's adapting to the stress. But in the long term, no, it shouldn't slow its growth in any way. Raven does a really good job of tolerating being pot bound. Raven,
Yes.
like Sansevieria, actually had one that broke the terracotta pot because it was so root bound. And
Nice.
everybody forgive me for admitting this, but it actually cracked the pot open before I realized, oh yeah, it's been a couple of years since I've repotted this guy.
Honestly, that's
Um,
kind of like my goal to have that happen to me one day. To have a plant that's grown so much that just like breaks the pot. I don't think it's bad parenting. I think it's just that your plant is growing so much, it just breaks the pot. Just
uh,
can't handle the pot.
no, it's not. It's not me being neglectful of my ZZ at all.
No, it's not. It's you being a very good plant parent and your plants are growing so well.
But there's a big difference between being able to tolerate being pot bound, and being happy and thriving. And with Raven, the exact same thing applies to light. It tolerates low light by like a champ, but that doesn't mean low light is going to make it thrive.
Right. I want to talk about that because it's something I thought about is, we do have a line of plants that are very good and suited for low light conditions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll die if they get higher light. I've seen some ZZs growing in full sun in Florida, and they can tolerate that. I mean, I would never put a house plant into full sun immediately because you're going to burn it. But if you slowly acclimate it, I've seen them growing in full sun. It's not that they can't, it's just that they are okay with low light.
Yeah, I like to talk about light being a scale.
Hmm.
And our producer Marcos is probably rolling his eyes because I bet he's heard this a thousand times now. But things can move up the scale, no problem. It's just that plants have a hard time moving down the scale. And when you see light on a plant tag, it's usually the low end of the scale, so you can move up from there. So something like pothos or ZZ that tolerates low light, yeah, medium or high light is even better. But if you have something, and off the top of my head, a highlight plant is not jumping in. Of course, because I'm talking and trying to think at the same time, and I can't always do that very well.
Highlight plant like a
But
majesty palm.
exactly, like a majesty palm or a fiddle leaf, you can't move that down the spectrum as well.
Mm-mm. Nope.
So if you
Tried
want your
that.
ZZs to grow faster, make sure you give them lots of bright lights. Make sure your expectations are in check. And if you've not, give them a little bit of fertilizer. Any general purpose houseplant fertilizer does the trick.
Hmm. Yeah. And I found that it also, once plants kind of get comfy where they are, they tend to grow no matter their conditions. So I've got a whale fin, Sansevieria, and it did a whole lot of nothing for a while. But now that it's kind of gotten used to its new environment, now it's popped off not one, but two pups.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, I'm a mom. I'm a Sansi mom. Uh, but I think what I've seen a lot with my plants is that once they get comfortable in their environment, and as long as it's consistent light, consistent moisture, consistent humidity for some plants, not all. Once they kind of get into their zone, they kind of hit their stride, and that's when I see them growing. But at first, it's kind of a slow go until they get comfy, so to say.
Perfect. All right. Moving on to our next subject. So every episode we'll answer some questions like this, and then we'll address a common misperception. And Michelle alluded to it earlier, but let's talk about fungus in soil, especially the mushrooms that some people see.
Yeah, fungus. I mean, I'm guilty. I've got some fungus growing. I got some little yellow mushrooms growing. Actually, it was in this plant over here. I have a philodendron over here, and I had some mushrooms popping out. I did not panic because not all fungus is bad. Actually, a big part of my job is working with the good fungus. I'm sure you guys have heard of mycorrhizae. That is a good fungus. It colonizes the plant roots. And not when you see a mushroom coming out of a plant, that doesn't mean it's a pathogen. It just means it's some sort of saprophytic fungi that set in. It's just um, what are they what my and like an opportunist, but it's not going to hurt your plant. What it does mean though is maybe it's a little bit dark and a little bit wet because that fungus is doing very well to have a fruiting body pop out. What do you
Yeah,
think, Justin?
that's a great point that I think a lot of people lose sight of. Is that the mushroom is not actually the fungus itself.
Mm-mm.
At the
Ooh,
risk of maybe sounding a little bit gross, the mushroom is its reproductive organ.
yes,
Uh,
sexually
you know,
reproductive organ. Sorry, I
exactly.
took it to the next
Um,
level. I'm sorry. This
you
is a
know,
Costa podcast. I shouldn't do
and
that.
so it's easy to think, well, I'll just pull the mushrooms out, and the problem is gone. And yeah, you've removed the reproductive organs, but the body of the fungus is still there. Um,
Actually.
and and the fungus, if you're seeing mushrooms, it's not a pathogen because it means it's not infecting your plant. Um, to be infecting your plant, it would have to be inside the plant. Therefore, um,
Not
the
visible outside
exactly,
like it is.
exactly. The
Yeah.
symptomology would be in the plant, not in the soil. But these fungus, most of them, as they work, they're slowly decomposing the organic matter in your potting mix, and that's helping make more nutrients available to your plants. And so, having mushrooms, while it may be a sign that your plants could be a little wetter than they want, just like having fungus gnats, it's not necessarily a sign that anything is wrong.
Um, Also, like Justin was saying, the majority of the plant or the majority of the fungus is found below the soil. And I have to shout out the largest living organism in the entire world is a fungus. And so what you're seeing on the surface is like nothing compared to what's below the surface because this fungus, I think it's a mycorrhizae fungus actually, but it's a couple of miles large. And I did a quick Google really quickly. It looks like it's in Oregon across the Blue
Woohoo!
Mountains. Woo! Woo woo! Yay, Justin, you live in a fungus area. That's something you guys should put on your shirts. Like, come to Oregon. We have the largest fungus. There's a fungus among us, and it's the biggest one. Um,
I bet there are T-shirts somewhere.
Oh, I want one of those. Okay. Birthday next year. Anyway, so yeah, what you're seeing on the top is not it's like an iceberg effect. What you're seeing on the top is much larger below the soil surface. But again, it's just kind of hanging out, doing its thing. It's an opportunist. You've got something there that it finds tasty. And so it's just kind of taking advantage of that. It's not taking anything away from your plant. It's not hurting your plant. But if you do see that, maybe kind of back off the water a little bit if you can.
Or you can also put a small fan nearby, one of those little desk fans to help increase
Yeah,
air movement. That will often prevent fungus from sending up their reproductive bodies.
very true. Yeah, very, very true. Well, is there anything else we're going to talk about on?
As we wrap up, I think we should probably let you know that this episode was sponsored by Raven's Easy. If you're looking for an easy care, elegant houseplant, look no further than Raven's Easy. It tolerates low light, it tolerates low water, it tolerates low humidity. It can stay in the same pot until you break it. Raven's
Ha!
Easy. Look for one at your local garden center.
Wow,
All right,
Justin, you
guys.
do
Thank you
commercials.
very much for hanging out with us. Hope you enjoyed. We'd love to get your feedback. So anything that you think that we can do better, anything that you'd like to hear more of or less of, just send us feedback.
Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Justin. And if you guys have any more questions, particularly bug questions, I'd be super happy to answer them.
Happy gardening from your friends at Costa Farms.